Dae-ho Kim stared at the notice on his dorm room door. The paper was bright yellow and impossible to ignore. Mandatory alien roommate assignment was written in big black letters across the top. He crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. Then he picked it out again and read it 3 more times. The words did not change. Neo-Seoul University was forcing him to live with an alien student from some place called the Nexari Empire. "This is crazy," Dae-ho said to his empty room. He sat on his small bed and looked around. The room was barely big enough for one person. Now they wanted him to share it with an alien. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Bo-Ram Lee, his friend from linguistics class. "Did you get the alien roommate notice too?" Bo-Ram asked. "Yeah, I hate this," Dae-ho typed back. "Come on, it could be fun. Think about it. First alien exchange program in human history. We are making history here." Dae-ho did not want to make history. He wanted to finish his engineering degree and get a job. The last thing he needed was some weird alien messing up his study schedule. The next morning, Dae-ho went to the housing office. Taemin Park, the coordinator, was sitting behind a desk covered in papers. He looked tired. "Let me guess," Taemin said before Dae-ho could speak. "You want to change your roommate assignment?" "Yes, I need to focus on my studies." "I cannot have distractions," Taemin laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. "Kid, I have had 50 students in here today saying the same thing. You know what I tell them all? Too bad. The university made a deal with the Nexari Empire. We take their students, they share their technology with us. You want to graduate? You deal with your alien roommate." Dae-ho tried to argue, but Taemin was already looking at the next student in line. There was no way out. 2 days later, Dae-ho was fixing a broken pipe in the basement of his dorm building. The university maintenance crew was useless, so he had to do it himself. He was using his favorite tool, a massive hydraulic wrench that he had built in his first year. The thing was huge and heavy, but it could fix anything. The wrench was not pretty. It was made from salvaged parts and looked rough, but it worked better than any fancy tool in the university workshop. Dae-ho had learned early that sometimes the best solution was the simplest one. He was tightening a stubborn bolt when he heard footsteps on the stairs. A voice called out in perfect but strange English. "Excuse me. I am looking for dormitory room 314. I believe I am lost." Dae-ho looked up and nearly dropped his wrench. Standing at the bottom of the stairs was the most unusual person he had ever seen. The alien was tall and thin, with skin that looked like it was made of pale blue crystal. Its eyes were large and silver, and its hair moved like it was underwater even though there was no wind. "You must be Veltar," Dae-ho said. He had memorized the alien's name from the paperwork. "Yes. And you are Dae-ho Kim, my assigned roommate." Veltar's voice was musical, like wind chimes. "I apologize for the intrusion. I was told you might be in this location." Dae-ho stood up and wiped his hands on his shirt. The alien was staring at his wrench with obvious fascination. "What is that device?" Veltar asked. "It is a wrench. I use it to fix things. May I examine it?" Dae-ho hesitated. The wrench was heavy and could be dangerous if not handled properly. But Veltar seemed genuinely curious, not threatening. "Sure, but be careful. It weighs about 30 pounds. Veltar reached out with long, delicate fingers. When the alien touched the wrench, Dae-ho saw its eyes widen in surprise. "This is remarkable," Veltar said. "So crude yet so effective. Your species builds tools with such directness." Dae-ho was not sure if that was a compliment or an insult. "It gets the job done." "Indeed it does." Veltar looked around the basement. "You repaired this infrastructure yourself?" "Yeah. The maintenance crew could not figure it out. Sometimes you just need to apply the right amount of force in the right place." Veltar was quiet for a long moment. Then it said, "On my world, we would use precision energy fields to manipulate matter at the molecular level. Your approach is different. Different how? More honest, perhaps. You do not hide behind complexity. You see a problem and you solve it directly." They climbed the stairs together to room 314. Dae-ho opened the door and showed Veltar inside. The alien looked around the small space with what might have been confusion. "This is where we both will live?" Veltar asked. "Yeah, sorry it is so small. I know your people probably have bigger rooms. Size is not the issue. I am simply trying to understand how two beings can coexist in such close proximity, without interference patterns." Dae-ho had no idea what interference patterns were, but he nodded anyway. "We will figure it out." Veltar had brought only one bag, but when it opened, strange light spilled out. The alien began pulling out devices that looked like they were made of glass and starlight. Everything was delicate and beautiful. What is all that stuff? Deho asked. Study equipment, environmental regulators, communication devices, standard student supplies. One of the devices was humming softly and projecting a small hologram. Another one looked like it was breathing. Deho watched in amazement as Veltar set up its side of the room. Your technology is incredible, Deho said. Thank you. Though I must admit, your wrench has given me much to consider. Tell me, how long did it take you to construct such a device? About a week. I had to find the right parts and figure out the hydraulics. A week? Veltar seemed to be thinking about something. Most impressive. On my world, creating a new tool requires months of planning and precise calculations. Sometimes you do not have months, Deho said. Sometimes you just need to fix the problem now. Veltar nodded slowly. Yes, I begin to see the wisdom in your approach. As night fell, both roommates tried to settle into their shared space. Deho watched Veltar meditate in front of a glowing crystal. The alien watched Deho work on homework with paper and pencil instead of a computer. Neither of them knew it yet, but they were about to teach each other things that would change both of their worlds forever. It all started with a simple tool and two very different ways of looking at problems. Outside their window, the lights of Neo Sol twinkled like the stars between their two worlds. Living with Veltar was like sharing a room with a science fiction movie. The aliens' devices hummed and glowed at all hours. Sometimes they made musical sounds that Veltar said were status reports. Other times they projected holograms that showed star maps or alien writing. Deho tried to be patient, but it was hard to study with all the lights and sounds. When he asked Veltar to turn things down, the alien looked confused. But these are set to minimum operational levels, Veltar said. How do you function without proper environmental feedback? I just do, Deho replied. Humans are good at adapting. Fascinating, Veltar said, like Deho was some kind of interesting bug. The real problem started in their second week together. Deho was working on a project with his lab partner, Hye-Jin Choi. They were trying to design a new kind of water filtration system for the university. The old pipes kept breaking and the administration wanted a cheap solution. The problem is pressure, Hye-Jin explained as they worked in the engineering lab. The current system cannot handle the flow rate we need. Deho was sketching designs on paper while Hye-Jin ran calculations on her computer. They had been working for hours without much progress. Maybe we are thinking about this wrong, Deho said. What if we do not try to reduce the pressure? What if we build something that can handle more pressure instead? That would require stronger materials. The budget will not cover that. Deho thought about his hydraulic wrench sitting back in his dorm room. That tool worked because he had not tried to make it fancy. He had just made it strong enough to do the job. What if we use recycled steel from the construction site? It is just sitting there. We could weld it into the shapes we need. Hye-Jin looked skeptical. That seems so basic. Basic works. They were still discussing it when Veltar appeared in the lab doorway. The alien often showed up at random times saying it was observing human academic processes. Good evening, Deho. Good evening, Hye-Jin, Veltar said politely. May I inquire about your current project? Hye-Jin explained the water filtration problem. Veltar listened carefully, then reached into its bag and pulled out a device that looked like a crystal flower. Perhaps I can assist, Veltar said. This is a molecular restructuring unit. It can alter the atomic bonds in your existing pipes to increase their strength by approximately 300%. Hye-Jin's eyes went wide. That is amazing. How does it work? Veltar began explaining something about quantum field manipulation and harmonic resonance. Deho stopped listening after the first sentence. He did not understand half the words Veltar was using. Can we see it work? Hye-Jin asked. Veltar set up the device and pointed it at a piece of old pipe they had been using for testing. The crystal flower began to glow and strange music filled the lab. For a moment, the pipe seemed to shimmer. Then the device made a loud pop and went dark. Oh, Veltar said. That is unexpected. What happened? Deho asked. Veltar examined the crystal device. Several parts of it had cracked. It appears that Earth materials have different resonance frequencies than I calculated. The device has suffered harmonic feedback damage, and is it broken? I am afraid so. This will require specialized repair equipment that is not available on your world. Hye-Jin looked disappointed. Deho felt a little sorry for Veltar, who seemed embarrassed by the failure. It is okay, Deho said. We can still use my idea about the recycled steel. Your crude approach? Veltar asked. The alien did not sound mean, just curious. Yeah, sometimes crude works better than fancy. Over the next few days, Daeho and Hee-jin built their water filtration system using salvaged materials and basic welding techniques. It was not pretty, but it worked perfectly. When they tested it, the water pressure was exactly what they needed. Veltar watched the whole process with growing fascination. The alien asked dozens of questions about welding, metal stress, and hydraulic principles. Daeho tried to explain, but he was not good with technical words. I do not understand your calculations, Veltar said one evening as they worked. I do not really use calculations, Daeho admitted. I just try things until they work. But how do you know if they will work without mathematical analysis? Daeho picked up his big wrench and showed it to Veltar. I built this by experimenting. I tried different configurations until I found one that felt right. Sometimes your hands know things your brain does not. Veltar stared at the wrench like it was a holy object. You rely on intuition? I guess so. Is that wrong? Not wrong. Just very different from how my people approach problems. The alien studies professor, Ji-woo Song, had been checking on all the human-alien roommate pairs. When she visited Daeho and Veltar, she seemed pleased with how well they were getting along. Any major cultural conflicts? Professor Song asked. Veltar's technology keeps breaking, Daeho said. Earth is harder on equipment than the alien world. And Daeho's methods are highly effective despite their apparent simplicity, Veltar added. I am learning much about alternative approaches to problem solving. Professor Song made notes on her tablet. That is exactly what we hoped would happen. Cultural exchange benefits both species. After she left, Veltar seemed thoughtful. That night, instead of meditating with its crystal devices, the alien sat on its bed and watched Daeho work on homework. Daeho, Veltar said finally, may I ask you something personal? Sure. Do you think I am too dependent on technology? Daeho looked up from his mechanical engineering textbook. I do not know. Are you? When my molecular restructuring unit failed, I felt helpless. On my world, if one device breaks, we simply use another device to fix it. But here, with limited Nexari technology available, I find myself unable to solve basic problems. You could learn to use human tools, but they are so primitive. Daeho grinned. That is what makes them useful. Simple tools are harder to break, and when they do break, they are easier to fix. Veltar was quiet for a long time. Then it said, would you teach me to use your wrench? Really? Yes. I believe it is time I learned some human methods. The next day, Daeho brought Veltar down to the basement where a new pipe had started leaking. He showed the alien how to hold the heavy wrench and apply steady pressure. Veltar's crystal hands were not really designed for gripping metal tools, but the alien was determined to learn. It took several tries, but eventually Veltar managed to tighten the leaky connection. I did it, Veltar said with obvious pride. Yeah, you did. How does it feel? Veltar thought about it. Satisfying in a way I did not expect. There is something appealing about directly manipulating physical matter. Welcome to human engineering, Daeho said, as they climbed back up to their room. Daeho noticed that Veltar was carrying the wrench more confidently. The alien was learning that sometimes the best solution was not the most advanced one. It was just the strongest. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning. Dean Woo Jin-han called an emergency assembly for all students and faculty. When Daeho and Veltar arrived at the main auditorium, they found hundreds of people packed into the seats. News cameras were set up along the walls. This must be important, Daeho whispered to Veltar. Indeed. I recognize the Nexari cultural attaché in the front row. Kethvor rarely appears at public events. Dean-han walked onto the stage looking nervous. Behind him was a large screen showing what looked like technical drawings. Ladies and gentlemen, students and faculty, the dean began. We face a serious problem. The new science building, which was supposed to open next month, has a critical structural flaw. The screen showed pictures of the building. It was beautiful, with flowing curves and crystal panels that reflected the Nexari architectural style. But there were obvious cracks in some of the support beams. The building was designed using a combination of human and Nexari engineering principles, Dean-han continued. Unfortunately, the two approaches have proven incompatible. The Nexari crystal supports are too rigid for Earth's seismic activity. The human steel reinforcements are too heavy for the Nexari design specifications. Yuri Kim, the head of the engineering department, took the microphone. We have had teams working on this for 3 weeks. Human engineers cannot modify the Nexari components without breaking them. Nexari engineers cannot strengthen the human components without making them too heavy. Kethvor, the Nexari attaché, stood up. The alien was taller than Veltar and wore formal robes that seemed to be made of liquid metal. "My government is concerned," Kethvor said in a voice like distant thunder. "This project was meant to demonstrate the possibility of human-Nexari cooperation. If we cannot solve this problem, it may affect future collaborative efforts." Deho felt Veltar tense beside him. The alien was clearly worried about what this failure might mean for the exchange program. "However," Dean Han said, "we are not giving up. Today we will hold a public demonstration. Any student or faculty member who thinks they have a solution is invited to try. We have set up a testing area with scale models of the problematic structural elements." After the assembly, Deho and Veltar walked across campus to the testing area. It was set up in the main courtyard with crowds of people watching. Several teams were already working on the problem. The scale model was about 10 feet tall and made of the same materials as the real building. The Nexari crystal supports were beautiful but visibly cracking under the weight. The human steel reinforcements were holding, but they were causing the crystal parts to warp. "This is exactly the kind of problem that requires delicate precision," Veltar said. "We need to balance the forces perfectly." Deho walked around the model looking at it from different angles. He had brought his hydraulic wrench more out of habit than any real plan. Several people gave him strange looks. The wrench seemed ridiculously crude compared to the advanced equipment other teams were using. One group of human engineers was trying to solve the problem with computer simulations. Another team of Nexari students was using devices that projected energy fields. A mixed group was attempting to find a compromise design using both approaches. None of them were having any success. "The fundamental issue," announced Professor Song, "is that human engineering prioritizes strength and durability, while Nexari engineering prioritizes elegance and efficiency. These philosophies are simply incompatible." Deho watched the teams work for another hour. Every solution they tried either broke the crystal components or overloaded the steel ones. It was like trying to make oil and water mix. Then he had an idea. "Veltar," he said quietly, "what if we are thinking about this wrong?"
"How do you mean?"
"Everyone is trying to make the crystal and steel work together. But what if they are not supposed to work together? What if they are supposed to work separately?" Veltar looked confused. "I do not understand." Deho picked up his wrench and approached the model. Several people stopped what they were doing to watch him. "The problem is that the crystal supports are too rigid," Deho said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "and the steel reinforcements are too heavy." "But what if the steel does not reinforce the crystal? What if the steel replaces the crystal when the crystal fails?" "That makes no sense," called out one of the human engineering students. "You cannot just swap load-bearing elements." "Why not?" Deho asked. He began carefully loosening some of the connections with his wrench. "Buildings are not supposed to be perfect. They are supposed to be functional." Kethvor pushed through the crowd to get a better look. "Young human, what are you attempting?" "I am making the building honest," Deho said. He continued working with his wrench, disconnecting some of the crystal supports and adjusting the steel reinforcements. "Instead of trying to make crystal act like steel or steel act like crystal, I am letting each material do what it does best." Veltar's eyes went wide as it realized what Deho was doing. "You are creating a redundant support system." "Exactly. The crystal supports handle normal loads because they are more efficient. But when there is stress that would break the crystal, the steel takes over because it is stronger." "But the calculations," one of the Nexari students protested. "Forget the calculations," Deho said. He was working faster now, his wrench moving with practiced efficiency. "Sometimes you do not need perfect balance. Sometimes you just need something that works." The crowd watched in silence as Deho rebuilt the model using his simple tool and straightforward logic. Instead of trying to create one perfect support system, he was creating two different systems that could back each other up. When he was finished, the model looked different. It was not as elegant as the pure Nexari design or as robust as a pure human design, but it was standing without any visible stress. Professor Song ran a series of tests on the modified model. She applied weight, vibration, and even simulated earthquake tremors. The model held solid. "Remarkable," Kethivor said. The crystal components operate at optimal efficiency under normal conditions, while the steel components activate only when needed. This preserves the aesthetic beauty of the Nexari design, while ensuring the structural integrity that human safety standards require. It is not pretty, Deho admitted, but it works. On the contrary, Veltar said quietly, I believe it is the most beautiful solution possible. It respects both approaches instead of forcing them to compromise. The crowd broke into applause. Dean Han announced that Deho's solution would be implemented in the real building. News reporters rushed forward to interview the young engineering student who had solved a problem that had stumped teams of experts. But Deho was not paying attention to the reporters. He was watching Veltar, who was staring at the hydraulic wrench with an expression of complete fascination. Deho, Veltar said, your tool. It is not just a device for applying force, is it? What do you mean? It represents an entire philosophy. Direct action, practical solutions, the willingness to choose function over form. Deho had never thought about his wrench in those terms, but Veltar was right. The tool was simple and ugly and effective, just like the solution he had just demonstrated. I think I am beginning to understand humans, Veltar said. You do not seek perfection. You seek solutions that work in the real world. Is that bad? No, Veltar said, still staring at the wrench. I think it might be the most important thing my people could learn. As the crowd dispersed and the news crews packed up their equipment, Deho and Veltar walked back to their dorm. The alien was unusually quiet, lost in thought. Deho did not know it yet, but his simple demonstration had started something much bigger than fixing a building. He had shown an entire alien species that there was more than one way to solve problems, and Veltar would never see the universe the same way again. Something was wrong with Veltar. Deho first noticed it 3 days after the building demonstration. The alien had always been neat and organized, but now its side of the room was chaos. Strange devices were scattered everywhere, some of them partially taken apart. Crystal components were mixed with pieces of human machinery that Veltar had somehow acquired. What are you working on? Deho asked one evening. Veltar looked up from a contraption that seemed to be part computer and part alien technology. The alien's silver eyes were brighter than usual, and its crystal skin was flickering with rapid color changes. I am exploring synthesis, Veltar said, combining human directness with Nexari precision. Your demonstration showed me that we have been thinking too narrowly. Okay, but maybe you should get some sleep. You have been working for 18 hours straight. Sleep is inefficient. There is too much to learn. Deho was concerned, but he did not want to interfere. Veltar was an adult, even if it was an alien adult. If the alien wanted to pull all-nighters working on projects, that was its choice. But as the days passed, Veltar's behavior became more erratic. The alien stopped going to classes and barely ate. It talked constantly about revolutionary breakthroughs and paradigm synthesis. The devices it was building became increasingly strange and complex. You need to see this, Veltar announced one morning, holding up something that looked like Deho's hydraulic wrench crossed with alien technology. Crystal filaments were woven through the metal and the whole thing pulsed with soft light. What is it? A hybrid tool. It combines the brute efficiency of human engineering with the molecular precision of Nexari technology. Watch. Veltar pointed the device at a broken chair and activated it. For a moment, the chair began to repair itself, the wooden pieces flowing back together like liquid. Then the device sparked, made a loud humming noise, and went dead. The chair collapsed into splinters. Interesting, Veltar said, examining the burned-out hybrid tool. The resonance frequencies are still not properly calibrated. Veltar, that looked dangerous. All innovation involves risk. Your species understands this better than mine. Deho was starting to worry seriously. He had seen human engineering students burn out from too much stress and too little sleep. But he had no idea what that might look like in an alien. He decided to talk to Professor Song. She listened to his concerns with growing alarm. Cognitive paradigm fracture, she said grimly. We were warned this might happen to some Nexari students. What does that mean? The Nexari mind is very structured and orderly. When their fundamental assumptions about reality are challenged too quickly, they can experience something like a mental breakdown. Veltar's entire worldview has been shattered by exposure to human methods. Is it dangerous? Potentially. We need to contact the Nexari medical specialist they sent with the exchange program. Nelthis should be able to help. Nelthus arrived at the university that afternoon. The Nexari healer was older than Veltar, with darker crystal skin and more formal mannerisms. It examined Veltar while Deho waited anxiously in the hallway. "The young one is experiencing severe conceptual disruption," Nelthus announced after the examination. "Its mind is trying to process contradictory engineering philosophies simultaneously. This is causing dangerous feedback loops in its cognitive matrix. Can you fix it?" Deho asked. Traditional Nexari healing involves restoring mental harmony through meditation and energy field adjustment. However, I suspect that approach will not work in this case. Why not? Because the disruption was caused by exposure to human concepts. The mind cannot simply forget what it has learned. We need a different approach. Yunsu Lim, a human medical researcher, joined the discussion. She had been studying the psychological effects of human-alien contact. "What if we do not try to restore Veltar's original mindset?" she suggested. "What if we help it integrate the new concepts instead?" "Explain," Nelthus said. "Human minds deal with contradictory information all the time. We are used to holding multiple perspectives simultaneously. Maybe we can teach Veltar to think more like a human, at least temporarily." Nelthus looked skeptical. "That could be dangerous. Nexari minds are not designed for such flexibility." Meanwhile, Veltar's condition was getting worse. The alien had barricaded itself in the dorm room and was working frantically on increasingly dangerous experiments. Jai Sung-o, the university security officer, reported that strange lights and sounds were coming from the room at all hours. "We need to do something before Veltar hurts itself or someone else," Professor Song said. Deho had an idea. "What if I talk to it? Veltar trusts me. Maybe I can help it understand that it does not have to choose between human and Nexari approaches." "That is extremely risky," Nelthus warned. "In its current state, Veltar might not recognize friend from foe." "I have to try." Deho approached the dorm room carefully. He could hear strange sounds coming from inside, mechanical noises mixed with alien music. The door was locked, but he had a key. Inside, he found Veltar surrounded by a maze of hybrid devices. The alien was working on something that looked like a cross between his hydraulic wrench and a Nexari molecular manipulator. Crystal and metal were fused together in impossible configurations. "Veltar?" Deho called softly. The alien spun around. Its eyes were blazing with silver light and its skin was cycling through colors rapidly. "Deho!" "Perfect timing. You must see this. I have created the ultimate synthesis. Human force and Nexari precision combined into one perfect tool." Veltar activated the device. Reality seemed to bend around it for a moment. Then the device exploded. Deho was thrown backwards against the wall. When the smoke cleared, he saw Veltar sitting on the floor looking dazed and confused. "I do not understand," Veltar said quietly. "Why does it not work?" "The theory is perfect." Deho sat down next to his roommate. "Maybe that is the problem." "What do you mean?" "You are trying to create the perfect tool. But my wrench is not perfect. It is just good enough." Veltar looked at the wreckage of its latest experiment. "But surely perfection is the goal of all engineering." "No," Deho said. "The goal is solving problems. Perfection is just one way to do that. Sometimes good enough is better than perfect. I do not understand the logic. Perfect things are fragile. They only work under perfect conditions. But the real world is not perfect. The real world is messy and complicated and full of surprises." Deho picked up a piece of the destroyed hybrid device. "This probably would have worked perfectly in a laboratory. But we do not live in a laboratory." Veltar was quiet for a long time. The alien's skin gradually returned to its normal pale blue color. "I have been trying to reconcile two incompatible philosophies," Veltar said finally. "They are not incompatible. They are just different. You do not have to choose one or the other. But how can I hold contradictory concepts in my mind simultaneously? The same way humans do. You use whichever approach works best for the specific problem you are facing." Veltar considered this. "So sometimes I should think like an Nexari, and sometimes I should think like a human?" "Sometimes you should think like Veltar," Deho said. "You are not just Nexari anymore. You are not trying to become human. You are becoming something new." The alien's eyes widened. "Something new." "Yeah. You are the first of your people to really understand human engineering. That makes you unique. Do not try to fit yourself into an old category." Nelthus and Professor Song found them sitting together in the wreckage. talking quietly about the differences between human and Nexari approaches to problem solving. Veltar was calm for the first time in days. "How are you feeling?" Elthis asked. "Different," Veltar replied, "but no longer fractured. I think I understand now that different does not mean broken. The cognitive disruption appears to have resolved itself," Nelthis told Professor Song, "though I suspect Veltar will never be quite the same." "Is that bad?" Deho asked. Nelthis looked at Veltar, who was examining the wreckage of the hybrid device with new understanding. "No," the healer said. "I believe it may be very good indeed." 3 months later, Deho and Veltar stood in front of the completed science building. The structure was beautiful in a way that neither pure human nor pure Nexari architecture could have achieved. The crystal panels gleamed in the sunlight, while the steel supports provided subtle but reassuring strength. "It works," Veltar said with satisfaction. "Of course it works," Deho replied. "We built it." Their hybrid engineering approach had been so successful that other universities were requesting consultations. The Neosol method was being studied by researchers on both Earth and the Nexari homeworld. But Deho and Veltar were working on something even more important. In the workshop behind the engineering building, they had set up a laboratory that looked like no other place in the universe. Human tools hung next to Nexari devices. Computer screens displayed data in both human mathematics and alien symbols. And in the center of it all sat their latest creation. It looked like Deho's hydraulic wrench, but refined and enhanced. The basic structure was still recognizably human, heavy, practical, built to last. But crystal filaments ran through the metal, and soft lights indicated system status. It was not trying to be either human or Nexari. It was something entirely new. "The force amplification is exactly what we calculated," Veltar reported, checking the readings on a hybrid display device. "And it is still simple enough to maintain with basic tools," Deho added, examining the mechanical components. They had spent weeks developing this new tool. Unlike Veltar's earlier frantic experiments, this project had been careful and methodical. They used human trial and error methods to test ideas, then applied Nexari precision to refine the successful concepts. So Yang, the diplomatic liaison, entered the workshop accompanied by several officials from both governments. Word of their breakthrough had reached the highest levels of human and Nexari leadership. "Gentlemen," So Young said formally, "I would like you to meet Zilwenth, the science coordinator for the Nexari Empire." Zilwenth was the most imposing alien Deho had ever seen. The science coordinator was tall and ancient, with crystal skin that had grown dark and complex over centuries of life. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Young ones," Zilwenth said, "show me this device that has caused such excitement." Deho picked up their hybrid wrench and demonstrated its capabilities. The tool could apply precise mechanical force like a human device, but it could also manipulate matter at the molecular level like Nexari technology. Most importantly, it could switch between these modes instantly depending on what the job required. "Impressive," Zilwenth said, "but I understand that the true innovation is not the device itself, but the methodology you used to create it." "That is correct," Veltar said. "We have developed what we call adaptive engineering. Instead of choosing between human and Nexari approaches, we evaluate each problem individually and select the most appropriate method. Sometimes we use careful calculations and precise planning," Deho added. "Sometimes we just try stuff until something works. Most of the time we use both approaches together." Hyunwoo Kang, a media correspondent, was recording everything for the documentary about the exchange program. His cameras captured the moment when Zilwenth picked up the hybrid wrench and examined it closely. "This represents more than technological advancement," the science coordinator said slowly. "This represents a new way of thinking about problems." "Yes," Veltar agreed. "We call it synthesis philosophy, the idea that different approaches can complement each other instead of competing." Zilwenth set down the wrench and looked directly at Veltar. "Young one, you have changed significantly since arriving on this world." "I hope that is acceptable," Veltar said. "More than acceptable. Essential. The Nexari Empire has become too rigid in our thinking. We have pursued perfection at the cost of adaptability. Your work here demonstrates that there are other ways to achieve excellence." The science coordinator turned to Deho. And you, young human, have shown remarkable wisdom in helping your alien colleague navigate this transformation. I just treated Veltar like a friend, Daiho said. Friends help each other figure things out. Indeed. This friendship has produced benefits that neither of our species could have achieved alone. Over the following weeks, delegations from across the galaxy arrived to study the hybrid engineering methods. The workshop became a teaching center where humans and aliens learned to work together in new ways. Daiho found himself explaining human engineering philosophy to alien scientists who had never considered the value of trial-and-error experimentation. Veltar taught human engineers how to use mathematical precision to enhance their intuitive approaches. The key, Veltar explained to a group of visiting researchers, is to remain flexible. Do not commit to one method before you understand the problem. And do not be afraid to fail, Daiho added. Sometimes you learn more from a failure than from a success. Boram Lee, Daiho's old friend from linguistics class, visited the workshop regularly. She was working on her thesis about communication patterns between humans and aliens. You two have created something unprecedented, she told them one afternoon. Most cross-species collaboration involves one group learning the other's methods. But you have invented entirely new methods that belong to both species and neither species. Is that significant? Veltar asked. It is revolutionary. You are proving that cooperation can create possibilities that neither group could imagine alone. As the semester drew to a close, Daiho realized that he did not want Veltar to return to the Nixari homeworld. They had become true partners and their work was just beginning. I have been offered a position at the Nixari Science Institute, Veltar told him one evening. They want me to establish a new department for hybrid engineering research. Daiho felt a pang of loss. That sounds like a great opportunity. It would be if I were going alone. What do you mean? I have requested that you be appointed as my co-director. The Institute has agreed. They want both human and Nixari perspectives represented in this new field. Daiho stared at his roommate. You want me to come to your planet? I want us to continue our work together. This is bigger than just building tools. We are creating a new way for different species to understand each other. Daiho looked around their workshop, filled with the strange and wonderful devices they had created together. Then he looked at his original hydraulic wrench still sitting proudly on the workbench where it all began. Okay, he said, but I am bringing my wrench. Veltar's crystal skin flickered with the color patterns that Daiho had learned meant happiness. I would not have it any other way. 6 months later, the Nixari Science Institute had been transformed. Human engineering students worked alongside alien researchers in laboratories that mixed both species' technologies. The sound of hammering and welding mixed with the musical tones of Nixari devices. At the center of it all, Daiho and Veltar continued to solve problems using their hybrid approach. They had proven that differences could be strengths instead of obstacles. And in a place of honor in their new laboratory, Daiho's original hydraulic wrench sat next to Veltar's first crystal device. Two simple tools that had started a revolution in how different species could work together. The universe was a bigger and more cooperative place because one human had been willing to share his big tool with an alien roommate who was brave enough to lose control of everything it thought it knew. Sometimes the most important discoveries begin with the simplest acts of friendship.